I will be leading the workshop this morning. We're going to spend some time talking about the FY 2021 application and partner review process. A couple of quick things. I believe it looks like pretty much everyone is already on mute, but just double check, and if you're not, please put yourself on mute so we can minimize the background noise. And also, if anyone has their video on, you can turn that off as well. So I think the best approach to this, as we have with previous workshops, is for everyone to ask questions as we go. We're going to cover quite a bit of territory today, and I think it would be better to get clarifications and answers to your questions while we're on a particular topic, rather than hold things till the end. So the options, as always, would be to either unmute yourself and just kind of step in and ask a question, which is absolutely fine. Or if you prefer, you can send your question to Christine via chat, and then Christine can ask the question for you. All right, we're going to advance the slide here and get the presentation started. I wanted to do a couple of quick updates before we get into the topic of applications. As all of you know, we have an executive committee that helps us deal with all of the challenges and issues that develop throughout the course of a fiscal year. The committee from last year was particularly helpful, as we spent quite a few months working through all of the guideline changes that went into effect here for 2021. So the committee that we had in place last year included Sherry McKinney from Bucks, Dave Pissner from Westmoreland, Heather Allison from Penn College, Linda Grove from Kutztown, and CJ from Shippensburg. Dave, Heather, and Linda are departing the executive committee, so they've fulfilled a 2-year term. And as new members to the committee, we're happy to welcome and bring on board John Goberish from Beaver County Community College, Julie Davis from Penn Highlands Community College, and Daria Welbinski from East Stroudsburg University. So welcome to our new committee members. Sherry McKinney and CJ Azell are returning for their 2nd year on the committee. And we look forward to working with everyone in addressing the challenges that lie ahead. Next slide. A couple of other quick updates, things I wanted to make sure we didn't run out of time. I was going to put these more towards the end, but thought we'd move them up front. I just wanted to let everyone know that partner performance evaluations will still be done this year. We're going to send out invoicing rates probably pretty directly, maybe here in the next week or so. They're not going to affect your 2021 partner admin rates, but I think a number of partners, just more or less out of curiosity, wanted to know, according to our records, where they ended up for the year. I can tell you that as we anticipated, the majority of partners did not meet or exceed standards. It's not a surprise. We kind of knew that was coming, which is why these invoicing rates don't affect admin fees in 2021. So we'll get those out to you soon, but also wanted to let you know that the individual partner reviews that I would typically have done by an on-site visit throughout the fall and early winter, we'll get those scheduled soon, but they're going to be conducted via Zoom. So, and we'll probably cut the time down substantially, because I can't imagine that we'll have a need for a full 2-hour conversation as we normally would. But I'll be happy to take all the time anyone needs to answer questions and work through any particular challenges or concerns. So Christine will be in contact with everyone soon to get those scheduled, and then we'll probably get moving on them sometime early September. Another change that's taking place for 2021 is with the help desk, tech support, and training. Everyone knows Jim Imler's passing, and so we had anticipated that Angela Hensley would be the go-to person for the help desk and tech support. However, Angela recently accepted a position with Kutztown University to become the WEDNet partner there. So congratulations, Angie, on that. Because of that, we thought that we didn't want to have any potential conflicts of interest with Angie serving as both a partner and then also contracted with us to provide tech support and training. So I think for now, and certainly for the foreseeable future, we're just going to say that all requests for any type of help, for support or training, all of that should be directed to the statewide office. And then we'll work from here on making sure that you get everything you need. So I think between Christine, Carol, and myself, we'll be able to work through that with everyone for the foreseeable future. All right, I want to talk just briefly about 1920 results. Let you know that we served 715 companies last year. We helped them to train 24,000 plus employees, and the total investment for the year was $6.5 million. Substantially less than what we had available, but under the circumstances, actually a little bit better than what I thought we would accomplish. So I think there's certainly the opportunity here for everyone to feel good about what we ultimately accomplished last year. And I want to thank you all for your hard work and for hanging in there and doing all the things you could to work with your companies and help them get their invoicing in and actually, I think, finish the year in about as good a place as we could have expected. So as we look ahead to 2021, everyone has already received your initial allocation. Those allocations were based on a projected $5 million carryover. I think that number is going to be pretty close to where we actually end up. We should have the final number this week as we finish up all of the invoicing payments and just making sure that there's nothing that's been overlooked in terms of operational costs or anything else. But the initial allocation, of course, also takes into consideration, from that $5 million, the operational cost for 2021, the GAT set-aside requirement, which we had DCED agree to lowering that, at least initially, from what has typically been 1.2 million down to 400,000. And then, of course, we also have to set aside the partner admin for all of the training. So the balance that was left was allocated to partners using the same funding allocation formula that we used last year. I know regardless of what your initial allocation amount is, every partner is, well, quite frankly, disappointed, I think is probably putting it mildly, in terms of the amount of money you have to start. But unfortunately, that it is what it is, and there's really nothing more that we can do about it right now. There is a possibility of some supplemental allocation. Again, depends on whether the final number for the carryover is close to 5 million, or perhaps it may be a little bit more than that. If there is actually a little bit more, I'll allocate that out to the partners as well. But I just want to be realistic in letting you know that if there is a supplemental allocation, it will be very small amount, probably not even enough to fund another company. But nonetheless, if the money is there, I'll make sure that it gets out to all the partners. The best chance of any kind of substantial additional funding would come in November when the state determines the balance of the fiscal year budget. And well, I'll tell you, that's just about anybody's guess in terms of how that'll go. I think the state has been waiting to see what the revenue and tax receipts were going to look like, and I don't think that's been all that favorable so far. There's also some anticipation that there could be some federal stimulus that might be available to the states and county governments. Again, that still seems to be very uncertain. I don't know if it's accurate or not. I might even be a little remiss in stating it because it's not necessarily a reliable source, but I did hear that the state budget deficit projection for this year could be as much as $6 billion or more. And if that holds true and there's no additional stimulus from the federal government, it's certainly possible that we will not get any additional funding this year. So I'm just trying to paint as realistic a picture as I can. I'm going to remain cautiously optimistic that DCED will be able to send a few more bucks our way. I know they want to. They still strongly support the program, and they certainly believe that workforce training is going to be a necessary and important component of moving the economy forward as we eventually get out of this COVID stage and back into a little bit more of a normal environment. So if there's anything they can do, I'm certain they will, but we're just going to have to wait a few more months till we see what happens. Next slide. All right, so let's get into talking about 2021 applications. Some of the things I'm going to talk about you already know, but I think for the benefit of those who are newer partners, and just to make sure that everyone's on the same page, I'll probably be a little repetitive in some things you're already aware of. For example, you already know that the 2 in a row, 3 out of 5 rule has been waived for 2021. So all companies are eligible regardless of their funding history. Now, when a new company, for the very first time, a new user of WEDNET goes in to submit an inquiry, it'll work just like it's supposed to. It'll work fine. They'll go right through the inquiry process, and you'll determine whether they move forward with the full application or not. Where there'll be a little bit of a glitch here is for existing companies that are reapplying for funds, companies that have been funded in the past and coming in this year for additional funds. If their funding history indicates that they're not eligible, they will still get that message that says you are not eligible based on your funding history. But the new inquiry link will still be there and work. So all they need to do is click on new inquiry, and they'll be able to move forward with the process. There's no need to ask Carroll to override that. I think we might have said that at one point in time, that would be the process. But we've done what we think is a reasonable compromise, which is to not do so much programming as to remove the message, but to let the inquiry, new inquiry button appear and work so that you can just simply instruct a company that contacts you and says, hey, I'm trying to submit an inquiry, but I'm getting a message that says I'm not eligible. All you need to do is just tell them, click on the new inquiry link, and it will work, and you can proceed with your inquiry and application information. So there's no need to have Carroll override that. You can just instruct the company to continue with the process. Also wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk about how you review and rank and prioritize and ultimately determine which applications to fund. You have to keep in mind that funds are very limited. I mean, very limited. In fact, I think, I've heard from some partners that are already saying, I need more money. I don't have enough to respond to all these applications. There's nothing we can do about that now. So what you have is what you have to work with. Don't rush to approve applications. I think a better approach is to collect applications, take some time to rank and prioritize them. And you have to take some things into consideration that you might not have in the past. For example, companies that had a contract last year and started but didn't complete their training and they're applying this year, maybe they should be given a higher priority. I can't say that they must be given a higher priority, but they probably should be. You may have some other reasons to say, well, I'm not going to fund them or fund them at a high enough level to support all of the training they started. But that's a decision you have to make. But I think generally speaking, they might be a higher priority. So you probably shouldn't be in a rush to start approving applications right away. The issue here really is once you approve an application and it gets through the statewide office and becomes a contract, it can't be reduced until the reallocation period. That means you have to wait until February to reduce a contract so that you can fund another one somewhere else. The only exception to that would be if the company agrees to give up some of that money. Otherwise, you've entered into an agreement with that company to provide them with X number of dollars, and that agreement states that you can't take that money back until the reallocation period. So just keep that in mind. There's no rush. We're going to talk about it in another slide going forward, but there's no requirement to have 75% under contract by the end of August. So we'll talk about that more in a few minutes. So you actually have plenty of time, I think, to make this work. The other really, yes.
I have a question.
Okay.
Eligibility, for example, if companies apply next year, will they need to count 1920, or is that year completely eliminated from calculation moving forward to 3 out of 5 or 2 in a row?
No, that year's not going to be completely eliminated. It's only that 2 in a row, 3 out of 5 is only being waived for this current fiscal year. So when we get into 21-22, 19-20 participation will count as in terms of the 2 in a row, 3 out of 5 eligibility criteria. So we're just waiving it this year because of these really unusual circumstances surrounding COVID, but we're not actually, taking it out of the formula going forward beyond this current fiscal year. So I don't know who asked that question, but if I didn't answer it sufficiently, let Christine know. Otherwise, I'll assume that I did. Any other questions right now, Christine?
No.
Okay. So back to ranking and prioritizing. One of the things that everyone really needs to do, I'm sorry, Carol, I didn't mean to go back. I just meant that the conversation's kind of going back there in a sense. I want to talk about the partner and the workforce development board letters that everyone has to submit. Many of you who've done this a number of years know what the expectations are, but again, for the benefit of some newer partners, you need to work with your predominant workforce development board and have them submit a letter to me that indicates that you've communicated with them about your applications, that you have talked to them about what the priorities for that region might be, and that they're basically on board and supportive of your approach. So I think that's something that you probably need to start thinking about and working on now, which is another reason not to be in too much of a rush to start submitting applications. In addition to your workforce development board, you should also be talking to other workforce and economic development entities in your region about what is going on with various companies, what types of applications you're receiving. Are there any companies that maybe should be prioritized higher based on what these other organizations are doing or what they know about company? Maybe some companies shouldn't be funded because someone knows they're going to start laying off people, or maybe they're going to shut down. So I think it's always good for us to not work in a vacuum and to get as much input as we can from the region. And so these are the two things that are required every year. Your letter from the partner to me that says how you've collaborated with others, and then specifically a letter from your predominant workforce development board with essentially it's their letter of support for your approach. So if anyone has questions on that maybe is going through this for the first time, let me know and I can talk to you about it in more detail, but I just wanted to remind everyone of those requirements.
Tom, this is Reggie on that. I'm sorry, I had to step away. Will you be accepting our witness asked if they can send the letter to you electronically this year? Is that acceptable?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna very much be willing to move away from hard copies of anything. We've kind of hung on to that for quite a while, even with the institutional MOAs and having original signatures. And this year we started getting away from that, allowed a lot of emailing of the agreements with electronic signatures or signatures that were scanned into the computer and then email that way. So yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Letters that they can email them. You're welcome.
It's Bonnie Spade at RAC. I have a quick question. When are those letters due?
Well, you kind of caught me off guard. I don't have the guidelines in front of me. Carol may know. They're in
August 31st.
August 31st. Okay, so
Yes.
those letters are due August 31st. I'm not a huge stickler on those. If you need a little more time, given the circumstances, I don't think that's a problem. But you should try to get them in as close to the end of August as you can.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The only thing that really has a consequence to it is your institutional MOA. And I believe we have them all. There may still be one that we're waiting on, but we won't approve applications for your institution until we have your institutional MOA. So that's the only thing that really has a consequence to it. These letters, again, while we want them as close to the end of August as we can, if you need a little more time, we can work with you on that. All right, take a few minutes here to talk about company verification. This has actually been a kind of a topic of a lot of conversation with everyone in the last few weeks. So until the COVID circumstances change, there is no expectation that anyone is going to do an on-site visit. So most of us are restricted from travel. It's just not something that, makes a lot of sense right now. So you do not have to do on-site visits. If you do, that's fine. That's still an acceptable form of verification, but certainly not required. The current verification policy, which is on page 11 of the Partner Policy and Procedures Manual, is what you're looking at right now. All new companies require an on-site visit within 12 months of the application. Existing companies that are in the system, that have been a participant in the past, require, should say, re-verification every 3 years. And whenever the company name or physical address changes. So those are the current verification policies. Something that we added that's in there for this year is if the company is active, if they remained active in terms of the 2 in a row, 3 out of 5 usage, we will accept documented partner knowledge as verification. In other words, you can go into the company notes and say, I work with this company on other projects, or I live near them, or my brother-in-law works there. There could be, whatever the partner knowledge of that company is, that you're willing to go on the hook and say, I know this company is for real. And I'm verifying this company. You can do that now without having to go through any of the other verification methods. So I wanted to make sure everybody was clear on that. What's maybe more important is not what our current policies are, but what the changes are going to be for 2021. So Carol, go to the next slide. And again, this is kind of the new part here, which is the active company, and you can document your knowledge. But the other thing that we're doing a lot more of this year, the second bullet there, for both new and existing or returning companies that would otherwise require an on-site visit, if you submit the company name, address, and FEIN number to Carol, she can check with Labor and Industry, and we have developed a method with them that gives us a high degree of confidence in terms of the verification. Now, there's one instance in particular where L&I has a difficult time or technically can't verify, and that is for sole proprietorships. They're checking unemployment insurance records to see if the company is paying into L&I. And in a sole proprietorship, they don't necessarily have to do that. So that's the reason we for sole proprietors can't verify them through L&I. So everyone else technically should be verifiable through L&I. Now, we don't want to overwhelm L&I with requests. And so we kind of started out the fiscal year submitting, every day, a couple every day as they came in from partners. But we quickly realized that that's not going to be an acceptable pattern for L&I. So here's what we'd like you to do. Only submit for verification the companies you plan to fund. So what started out is, as soon as a company submitted an inquiry, a partner would send that company information to Carol and say, can you verify this company? I think what we're going to have to do is, let's assume up front that every company is legit. It's the companies, they're the ones submitting the application, and so they're the ones who have to do the majority of the work. Let's assume that the company's legit until you decide that you actually want to fund them. So once they make the cut through your ranking and prioritizing, and you go, this is one I want to fund, then we go for L&I verification. That way we limit the number of requests to L&I. And then we would also ask that you try to bundle them in terms of, sending at least a handful at a time as opposed to one at a time. And on this end, we may bundle a little further by submitting only 1 or 2 requests per week to L&I as opposed to every day. So hopefully that was a clear explanation of just saying, let's try to streamline this process as much as we can so that we don't overwhelm L&I with verification requests. Now, in the instances where L&I can't verify a company, for example, sole proprietors, and there are others who aren't sole proprietors who aren't on the L&I active list. So that's a whole nother issue, but we can help you to determine another acceptable method for verification. So if L&I comes back and says, we don't have record of this company, it doesn't necessarily mean that we can't fund them. We have some other options we can look at, but we'll work with you. The statewide office will work with you in determining another acceptable verification process if we can't get it through L&I. All right, are there any questions about the company verification process?
I'd like to make a comment about it if I could.
Okay.
The process with L&I is not instantaneous, meaning if I send an email down there, it could be 24 or 48 hours before they get back to me. So just understand that when I get your emails, I batch them together. I send an email down to L&I, and it takes anywhere from 24 to 48 hours before they get back to me. And once they do, I will go into the company profile and indicate whether or not they were verified or unverified by L&I. So I will take care of that step for you.
Thanks, Carol. Are there any questions? Okay, we'll move on. We're going to talk about the training plans themselves. So starting any company that started training in 1920 but could not complete the training, those training events can be added to the FY 2021 training plan. So I think everybody's pretty clear on that. However, the start date of the training has to be entered as July 1st, 2020, regardless of the actual start date, which was sometime back in 1920. So let's say it started, April 3rd. They got a few days of training. Probably more likely it started March 3rd. They got a few days of training. COVID hit. They didn't finish it. They now want to finish the training and submit it. The start date isn't March 3rd. It's July 1st. We could reprogram Isaac to accept March 3rd, but we have to find a balance between how much time do we spend rewriting code and testing Isaac and going through all of those steps for a short-term change versus just finding another way to manage it that seems reasonable. So it seems reasonable to just put in a July 1st start date, put in the actual end date of the training. And then if the documentation that gets submitted in terms of an invoice is from March, will know that training falls into this category of training started in 1920, but finished in 2021. And it will be fine in terms of how it's viewed in audit. We'll have everything well documented, and it'll be fine. So a company may call you and say, hey, I can't enter this training because Isaac won't let me put in a training date of March or April. So you don't have to reach out to Carol and say, what do we do with this? The response is just use a July 1st start date. And then the final thing on the training plans is training that was completed last fiscal year, but never got invoiced, cannot be added to 2021. So this exception that we're making is only for training that started but could not be completed. If somebody tries submitting a training event that they started in June and completed in June, but just never got around to invoicing it, well, that's too bad. We can't add that to the 2021 application and then pay it out this year. All right. I'm going to wrap my portion of this up here with this final slide. I wanted to talk about funds under contract. I had mentioned earlier that the 75% target for August 31st is waived. So you don't have any target for August 31st. I just want you to work on collecting your applications, review them, rank and prioritize them. And then when you're ready, you can begin to submit them. You can begin to, allocate your funding to those applications and submit them to the statewide office. But again, don't rush that process. This 90% under contract expectation for September 30th remains in effect. And you must have that. You must reach that goal by the end of September, or preferably sooner. So when I say don't rush it, I'm not suggesting you wait until the end of September to submit anything. You just don't have to submit it today. So later in August, early in September, if you are 90 to 100% under contract, that's kind of an ideal scenario. That's where I would like you to be. But if you're not at 90% at the end of September, any funds in excess of 10% of your allocation that remain in your bank account are going to be recovered by the statewide office and redistributed to other partners. So October 1st rolls around, we're going to look at everybody's bank account. And if you have more than 10% of your allocation that's not under contract, you're going to lose it. We're not going to ask you if you still want it. We're going to pull it back. We're going to take the money out of your bank account and we're going to allocate it to other partners. I could allocate millions more right now if I had it, just from what I know partners have been asking for. I can't let a dime sit on the table beyond September 30th without it going to work in terms of being in a company contract. We need to demonstrate to DCED that we need more money. And if they look at the end of September, and they do ask these questions, if they ask how much do you have under contract and we're only at 75%, that's the wrong message. So I would rather that we were at 100%. But 90% is our minimum target. That's not to say you shouldn't be at 95 or 100, but you just need to be absolutely at 90% or you will lose the difference. All right, just take one last opportunity for questions on anything I've talked about, and then I'm going to turn it over to Carol. Any
This is Heather.
Yes, Heather.
I have a question about what are you doing about the turnover rate for companies? Because I think a lot of them are going to be high.
Yes, that's a good question. Generally speaking, I will still go through the process, but I will approve an exception, generally speaking, for most any turnover rate. Now, with that, I will say that we had a company submit an application or an inquiry just this week that was marginally eligible. I mean, you could make the case either way as to whether or not we should even fund them. And they came in with an 80% turnover rate. So just based on that, my response to the partner was not eligible. So I can't say that we're going to waive every turnover rate, but I agree with you, Heather, in your comment that we're going to see an unusually high number of employee turnover rates above the 25% limit, and we will, in every case possible, make an exception so that companies can still apply. But it's the same process. You have to request the exception just so we can kind of keep control of that and not fund things that are, you know, kind of at the very extreme end of that. Any other questions? Okay, now the next portion of this presentation, Carol is going to do, and she's going to talk more specifically about what she looks for and what you should be looking at as you work through an application. And in large part, we want to help you minimize the number of sendbacks and questions that get raised after you submit something. So Carol's going to give you her view on applications and what she looks at as she puts the first level review on them at the statewide office.
For those that have participated in any of our other WWW sessions that we did earlier in the year, this may be a refresher for you. We have a lot of new partners, some as of recent as of this week, that are new to the program, so they need some basic training. So I tried to use data from Isaac that was actual representation of things that I've found. If you recognize the company or the information as one of your companies, it's not intended to be calling you out as a partner for not doing your job. I just wanted to use actual live examples for partners to see what I look for when applications come to the statewide office and make it easier for you guys. So the first thing that I look at is the company dashboard. The company dashboard, the first thing is the description. This particular company has a one-word description. It should be at least 1 to 2 sentences. It should tell us what the company does or manufactures. I have no clue what this company actually manufactures because it doesn't tell me anything. So that would need to be expanded before it comes to the statewide office. You as the partner, if you know what the company does, you can expand it on behalf of the company, or you can send it back to the company requesting that they expand it themselves. It doesn't need to indicate where the company's located or how long the company's been in business. We just need to know what the company does so we can determine their eligibility from that. The next thing that I look at is NAICS codes. And unfortunately, my little red circle kind of moved. It's supposed to be surrounding the 1111. The first thing that I look for is there even a NAICS code entered? Sometimes companies don't enter a NAICS code and the field is blank. NAICS codes are required to be 6 digits. This particular NAICS code is only 5 digits, so it's missing 1 digit. The other thing that you need to check for is through the census website, which I've indicated on the slide, you want to type in the actual code that's entered and see if it's currently valid. NAICS codes change every 5 years, so what may have been valid in 2012 may not be valid in 2017. NAICS codes will be changing probably in 2022, so they do change on a periodic basis. One thing that I do want to indicate is if you're reviewing an application that is at partner review and the NAICS code is not valid, if you go into the company dashboard and change the NAICS code yourself, it does not populate the company's pending application. It will change on the company's dashboard, but it does not change the pending application. The way you get it to populate the pending application is at step number 4, which is partner review. You send the application back to the company with instructions to 1, either change their NAICS code, or 2, if you've done it for them to review the new NAICS code and confirm and resubmit the partner review. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions on that? Okay, moving on to the next slide. Looking at the company's NAICS code, This particular company's NAICS code is 424480. According to the NAICS website, this company is a fresh fruit and vegetable merchant wholesaler, which does not fall into one of the current eligible industry clusters. Because they're not eligible, the partner would need to request an exception and attach it to company notes for them to receive funding in FY 2021.
Carol,
Yes.
does that apply for any errors, your instructions and returning at step number 4?
I'm not sure what you're asking. Any errors in what? The NAICS code?
Carol's instructions and yes.
So if you have multiple issues that you need the company to correct, one being the NAICS code, it could be the company's description, you can at step number 4, itemize the issues that you want the company to address in one send back. You don't necessarily want to instruct them to change their NAICS code. They resubmit it to partner review, and then you notice, oh, they don't have a good description in it, and then send it back again. So it's best to look at all the fields on the company dashboard of things that need to be looked at, and then determine what needs to be fixed and send it as one send back. Does that answer that person's question?
Yes.
Okay. Good. So we use the dashboard, the NAICS code and the company description to determine if the company is eligible for funding. And this year with the new guidelines, eligible industry clusters, commercial, industrial in nature, and are not explicitly ineligible as defined by our guidelines, opens up the eligibility to a lot of companies. You want to attach company exception approval emails that you obtain from Tom to the company notes. It does not get attached to contract notes. And the reason being is company notes is company specific documentation, where contract notes is fiscal year documentation.
Carol,
Yes.
can you repeat what you said about companies and the exceptions?
Companies and the exceptions. So are they asking whether they are in an eligible industry cluster, commercial, industrial in nature, and are not explicitly ineligible as defined by our guidelines? Is that what they're referring to?
This company in particular, the NAICS code.
Oh, okay. So this company is not eligible based on our current guidelines. This company was given an exception for ES funding in both 18-19 and 19-20. So for this company to be eligible in 2021, the partner is going to have to request an approval, an exception approval from Tom and attach it to the company notes for this fiscal year. That answer that person's question?
I believe so.
Okay, and just a reminder that exception requests cannot exceed 10% of your allocation. So if this company comes in and the partner has a $100,000 application or allocation, and this company has a $50,000 pending application, the partner needs to keep in mind that they can only request funding for this particular company that cannot exceed 10% of their allocation. And that's all exceptions, not just this one particular company. So another thing that determines whether or not a company will be funded is the turnover rate. As you can see by this dashboard, this company has a 61% turnover rate. Any turnover rates that are 25% or higher are considered ineligible without an exception approval from the statewide director. So if you see a turnover rate of 25% or higher, the company needs to attach written justification, explanation of why they have their excessive turnover rate to contract notes. The partner then needs to request an exception request from Tom, and if he approves it, also attach it to contract notes. A change for FY 2020, turnover rate exceptions are not counted towards your 10% exception threshold as they have been in the past. So that will allow your threshold to be used towards companies that are not meeting the eligibility criteria of the program. You don't have to worry about a lot of these nursing homes that have really high turnover rates. If that's a large target audience in your area, you don't have to worry about accepting applications from them because of the fact that they have turnover rates that are excessive. Any questions on that?
This is Reggie. Are there any industries besides the nursing home industry, which we found out last year, that we should be on notice or be aware of that might hold exceptionally high rates for our consideration this year?
I personally don't. I don't really analyze that. I
Reggie,
have analyzed excessive turnover rates by companies.
Yeah, I can respond to that just briefly.
Okay.
Of course, we know that nursing homes and healthcare in general, at kind of a nursing home or home healthcare or hospice, the things that are eligible this year, at that level of healthcare, there's a lot of turnover, regardless of the COVID issue or not. There's just historically a lot of turnover, and we expect to see that even more now, given all these new circumstances that everyone has to deal with. So I don't know that there's any specific industries where we could point to and say there's going to be a lot of high turnover here, but the intent is to just make that policy work across the board. So I don't know that there's any specific industries that I would tell you to watch for, but we think in general, because COVID really wasn't selective, it hit everyone almost equally. There will be a lot of turnover in a lot of industries, and we'll try to work with all that we can to get them through the process.
Thank you.
So one thing that I look for is the company website matching the company name. And I'm using Site Industries LLC as an example, that their website is cemsites.com. So I went out to cemsites.com, and it is a cloud software for cemeteries. That's what the website says. Now, granted, the company description does indicate software development and sales, but I could not find any connection to Site Industries LLC on this website. So then I Googled Site Industries LLC separately, and I was able to find a website for that particular company that was not cemsites.com. So I'm curious as to why the company listed a different company's website, and there could be a valid explanation that I'm not aware of, and we would just ask that the partner explain that in company notes prior to submitting it to the statewide office. That way I don't have to ask that question again. And the reason we ask that you explain it in company notes versus contract notes is because if this company applies again next year, I don't have to ask you the same question. All I have to do is refer to company notes and see that it was already asked and answered, and therefore it doesn't need to be asked again. If you put it in contract notes, it's fiscal year specific. I'm not necessarily going to remember that I asked this question, and if it was addressed in contract notes, it's not going to appear under the new application. Does anyone have any questions? And the other thing that I do when I look at company websites is, does the address on the contract company dashboard match? Or is it a different address? Does the phone number match? Does the company name match? Those sort of things, if they don't match, there could be valid explanations why they don't match, but they should just be addressed in company notes. That way, I don't need to ask those questions when I'm reviewing it at the statewide office. Any questions? Okay. For new partners who haven't been through this process, companies have to be verified before you can submit them to the statewide office. And as Tom indicated, you're not required to do site visits this year because of COVID. So I will be doing some verification through L&I. But how you tell whether or not your company is verified or not is on the dashboard under the company information. And it's going to be one of two buttons. Either it's going to say company not verified or company verified. If the company is not verified, you will not be able to submit it to the statewide office until it's verified. So that you would need to follow the process outlined by Tom earlier in this session of sending me the company name and FEIN. I will check with L&I to see if they've been paying into the unemployment compensation system. If they have, I will verify the company, and any note that I add will automatically be added to company notes. If you want to see any company notes, instead, you would click on the company note icon, which is not captured in the screenshot. So you can see any prior methods of verification. And it also includes documentation that's not fiscal year specific. It's company specific, such as email address explanation. Say a company has an email address that doesn't match the company name. Well, it could be very easily explained because the company could be a parent company to a subsidiary, and therefore they all have different email addresses than the company that's actually applying for funding. Another type of documentation that would be under company notes will be exception approvals. So if you have a company that doesn't meet the eligibility criteria of the program and you have to request an exception for Tom, which he does approve, it will be documented in company notes. Company notes should not be used for documentation that is fiscal year specific, such as turnover rate exceptions, GAT offers. That sort of documentation should be attached to contract notes. Something that you may or may not be aware of, but say a company is verified and it was verified 2 years ago, but you were on site recently and you go into company notes and add that note. By you adding the note without using the company verified button does not change the 3-year window time frame. Yes, you've added an updated company verification note, which is fine, but the 3-year window has not started with the new note. And the only way the window changes is if you use the company not verified button. Are there any questions to that? So that's all the information that I look for on a company dashboard. Now I'm going to talk about the actual application process. So this is an example of an actual MOA that was uploaded for 2021. As you can see, it's very blurry. I cannot read the company name. I can't read the company FEIN. I can't read who the partner is, and I can barely read the signature. So if an MOA is uploaded, one, you want to make sure if it's for the current fiscal year 2021 and that the company has not taken a prior year's MOA and signed it and uploaded it. 2, you want to make sure that it's actually signed, because sometimes people will upload a blank MOA and not realize it. And 3, you want to make sure that it's legible. Unfortunately, this one was not legible, so I notified the partner by email, hey, you might want to get them to either upload a legible version or electronically execute the MOA. If the MOA is executed electronically, there is nothing that you need to do with step number 1. You only need to view the MOA if the MOA has been uploaded. Any questions on that? The training plan. I know we had an extensive session going over the details of the training plan, so I'm just doing this as an overview. You want to look at the training plan and read what the event name is and the description and all the information that has been entered. Is the training event the actual name of the training event, or is it the name of the training vendor who's providing the training? It should reflect the actual training event and not the training vendor. The description. Does it list the topics and subjects learned in the training? Well, this particular example indicates who the training provider is. It indicates the length of the training. It indicates why they need to take the training. But it doesn't tell me anything of what the employee learned. So this description is not a valid description. Something else that you want to look at on training plans. Are all the training periods identical for every training event that has been entered? Are the training event dates the whole fiscal year? If they are, they may need to be revised or noted with an explanation. Something else that you may want to look at is the cost reasonable for the type of training that it is? Is the cost reasonable for the training period that it's being done in? And unfortunately, I had changed the a screenshot since this presentation was done, and I had a different example, but someone had entered in-house training for 4 days for $119,530. Whether it's in-house training or third-party training, that would not even be considered reasonable. Something else that you should look at is, are the training providers selected for each training event correct? I've noticed that some companies will enter in-house training for every single training event, even though you can tell by the description of the training event that it's not in-house training. So you really want to look at the description and what the training is and determine if in fact it is in-house training, or does the training type, provider type, need to be trained or changed. When you're submitting training plans to the statewide office, at least one training event has to be reviewed. The system does not require you to review every single training event, and some partners choose not to fund certain training events, so they will not mark them as reviewed. And that's fine as long as one training event is marked reviewed when it comes to the statewide office. If all the training events are still pending, it will not allow you to submit it to statewide review until at least one event is marked reviewed. The other thing that partners should look for is if all the training events are exactly the same as the employee cap of $2,000. That's a red flag, because that means that the company has not determined what the actual cost of the training is and just entered 2,000 and hopes to get funding for that, when in fact the training may be much more or much less. And so you want an accurate reflection of what the cost of the training is so you can determine how to distribute your allocation effectively. And the last step during the application process is to look at the application that was submitted. You want to make sure that the fields are completed, such as the company POC's name, their phone number, email address, and title. Fax number is not required because a lot of companies don't even have fax machines anymore. But if they have a primary and an executive, those fields need to be completed for both people listed. If in fact any of those fields are blank, you would need to advise the company to update that person's user profile with the missing information. And this is where I also look at the email address to see if it matches the company name. If in fact this said something else and didn't match AK Steel, I would need to have an explanation as to why the email address does not match in company notes. Any questions on that? And this is where I meant about the pending application in the NAICS code. If in fact this NAICS code had been changed on the company dashboard and the application was sitting at partner review and was changed, this number here would not reflect the change. And that's where I say, I will send an application back saying that the NAICS code was changed on the dashboard but doesn't populate their pending application. Well, this is their pending application, and this is how I tell whether or not it's updated or not. So at step number 4, you have to indicate a partner requested amount. You can see by this particular company that they requested $197,000 because their training plan has $197,000 on it. Well, companies have a cap of $100,000. And so partners may want to have a discussion with companies prior to entering their training plan of what reasonable expectations are. Does this company truly believe that they're going to get $197,237.51 when the company cap is $100,000? So because the funding is so limited and because no company is going to actually get a $100,000 award, the company has actually done extra work in entering $197,000 worth of training events. So you want to encourage companies to include training that is most important to them on their training plan. We want to get the most value from our investment, so companies should focus on high quality skill building training. Adding every possible training event they can simply may be wasting time because they will not get reimbursement for it. So partners may be wanting to have this conversation with companies prior to them starting their training plan. So they're not spending a lot of extra time entering training events that they're not going to get reimbursed for.
Carol, this is Reggie.
Yes.
Way that the company can calculate like double counting, because sometimes it's the same individuals are taking each one of the classes as they're inputting their training events. That also is going to have a very high training plan amount. So is there a way that they can do that early on?
You and I have no knowledge of that. We have no way, Isaac has no way of knowing that the employees are the same employees.
Okay.
So that's just a conversation you're going to have with the company and say, hey, I know you're a small company, but yet you have a training plan with 1,000 employees on it. So obviously some of these employees are dupes. You understand that the employees are going to max out at $2,000. And if you only have 50 people at your company, you can't be requesting, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I thought that was the case. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something. Thank you.
Yes. So as a checklist of things, just a quick review, I look at turnover rates. I look at company description. I look at the NAICS code to see if it's valid. I do look at the company website to see if it matches the information that's entered on the dashboard. Is the company currently verified? I look at step number 1 if the MOA is uploaded. I look at step number 2, the training plan. And I look at step number 3, the actual application that was entered. If you look at these particular steps prior to submitting them to the statewide office, it should reduce the sendbacks. I'm not saying that if you look at every single one of these that I'm still not going to have questions, because I may see something differently than you do, and so therefore it just needs clarification. But if you do follow this checklist, it should make your submission to the statewide office a lot smoother and get the applications approved faster. Are there any questions about the application process or what I look for when applications are submitted to me? The only thing that I will say is some partners have submitted their pending applications to the statewide office. I have not approved them. They are still sitting at statewide review. If you feel that after today's session that you want to pull them back to review them or to change the partner requested amount, I do not have to send them back to you. All you have to do is pull them back to partner review. That can be done at your level. And then you would just resubmit them when you are ready and have done your review of all your pending applications.
Carol, let me just add to that.
Sure.
I think that's a very good point in that having heard all we had to say this morning about not rushing through your apps and ranking and prioritizing, if you think you're going to want to reconsider anything you've already submitted to the statewide office, I would highly recommend you pull it back this week. And let's agree that anything that remains at statewide office review as of Monday, we'll begin approving or more thoroughly reviewing applications at the statewide office and potentially approving them to contracts. So if you're going to pull something back, do it in the next few days. And if it's there on Monday, we'll go ahead and review it. And if there are no questions, we'll approve it. Again, there's nothing that says we can't start approving contracts. We certainly can. I just wanted to make sure everyone was clear that you really have to think about this in a broader context of all of the applications you might get. And once we approve a contract, we can't take that money back until February. So that's the final word on that. If it's there on Monday, we'll start approving them if there are no further questions. All right, I think that wraps up everything for both Carol and I. We went a few minutes long, but we'd certainly be willing to take any other questions. So we'll ask one final time. Does anyone have any questions on anything we talked about today?
Will this presentation be available for us to print off anywhere? Will it be listed in Isaac?
Yes, I will. I need to make some corrections to some things I saw, but yes, I will post them under the tutorial folder in the file management widget.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Tom, are we doing a survey?
Yeah, we probably should. We've done
Okay.
after each of these workshops. It's just a couple of quick questions. we'll send out to you following this just to get some feedback on how it went. You know, was it clear? Did you get out of it what you wanted to, and what can we do to improve it for the next time? I think these workshops seem to be working out pretty well. I don't know what the next one will be, but we will certainly figure that out and let you know as soon as we have something scheduled. I think we might be getting relatively close to having DCED ready to do an update on what's going on across the department with other programs that we should all know about. So I'll be talking to Gwen Ross here later this week and see if we can get something out on the calendar for a DCED update. But always looking for input and feedback from the partners in terms of what you'd like to see next. So, you know, if you have thoughts, let us know. One last call for final questions.
Tom?
Yes.
Okay, I have a question from somebody said they are not able to access the files that were uploaded earlier in the year. The 2021 WetNet presentation, it won't open for them.
Do you know anything about that, Carol, or no?
No, send me the person's name and I'll email it to them. Or
Yeah,
Okay.
whoever that was, have them reach out to Carol and she'll work with them on figuring out what's going on.
Okay.
All right, well, I think that concludes everything for today. We thank you again for joining us and taking some time to sit through this workshop. If you do have any questions after we disconnect here, certainly feel free to email me, Carol, or Christine, and we'd be happy to get you what you need. So thanks again, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll talk to you all again soon. Take care.
Thank you.